I used to travel a lot with my family growing up, and they'd always ask me, do you think you'd ever go on a holiday with your friends? I would always say no because at the time I was a child, and the idea of flying somewhere without someone with me who knew what they were doing deeply terrified me. A couple years pass, I join an online group with most of my now closest friends, and a lot of them go on holiday to Texas in summer of 2022. The invitation to go was extended to me, but when I was offered several months prior, I didn't think I'd be up for it. This would go on to become one of the biggest regrets of my life, and for every subsequent year I have made sure to go on these trips despite how stressful I would find it to get there. Fast forward to now and I've been out of the country to meet with my friends 3 times now. This doesn't count the 2, soon to be 3 times that I've driven down to England, since there's not much to say there other than I did a lot of driving. Can't say that I recommend doing an over 7-hour round trip 2 days in a row, but it was worth the sore leg it gave me. It also doesn't count the 2 times that someone else has made the trip up to Scotland to meet me, because I can't imagine you'll be particularly gripped with the tale of me getting on a bus and making it to my destination without any hassle. There's a lot more meat on the bone with the America stories, so those are what I'll focus on. I planned a video a few years back on the first group trip that I ever went on as a way to recount my experiences and get my feelings onto paper, but I ended up scrapping it halfway through the editing process because it ended up being a lot more open than I'm willing to be publicly. I got to make it as a personally fulfilling project, but it's not something I think needed to be released into the wild. But now that I've got 2 more international travel experiences under my belt to approach the idea in a different way, yeah, I can give the storytime format a shot, sure. This won't go super in detail on what actually happened on the trips, that's not what this is about. This is mainly just me telling the stories about how I got there and back, because most of them have at least a few funny events to look back on and wonder how I got through everything in one piece. What they don't have is accompanying visuals, or an editor who's skilled enough to make this particularly interesting to look at. So a lot of this is going to be B-roll footage and you'll just have to use your imagination. Cool? Cool. The first trip I took was to Miami, Florida between the 2nd and 9th of July in 2023. I quickly found out that my younger self was right about everything going wrong if I didn't have someone competent with me. I had 2 flights to catch that day, one leaving Edinburgh at 9:30 in the morning to take me to New York, then another later that day to my final destination. My itinerary was set for a 17-hour journey since I always show up at the airport at least 3 hours before departure, and I'd be making my final landing at just after 6 PM local time. So I wake up at 4 in the morning, get to the airport at 6:30, pretty much right as the check-in opens for my airline. I do the online check-in as I wait in the queue to drop my bag off. Everything is normal. I get to the front of the line at around 7:30, and what do you know, my flight is cancelled already. Not the one I was supposed to board 2 hours from that point. Apparently the one to Miami from New York wouldn't be able to take off due to weather, and I was put on a different route. The flight I'm supposed to get now leaves at 3:30, and even after some issues with my boarding pass, it takes me maybe an hour tops to get through security. So now I've got over 7 hours to spend in the waiting area. Thankfully, the person working at the airline desk wasn't just going to leave me with nothing. I was given a form to claim any reimbursements for out-of-pocket costs caused by the delays. Foreshadowing is a literary device and an entire £13 meal voucher. How generous of them. In fairness, I actually did find a place where I got a pretty good meal with that, so it wasn't a complete bust. The lunch I bought included a cheesecake pot, which I didn't realize until I was about to eat it that I didn't have a spoon. Good job, me. If there's any other silver lining to my time spent dicking around, is that I got to walk through the perfume store connecting security to the rest of the waiting area without stopping for the first time in my life. Anytime I went with my family previously, they would spend ages in there, so that was one of the most liberating feelings in the world. God knows what I did for the rest of that day. My phone tells me that I walked nearly 6 miles, but I doubt I was pacing around the entire time. I know I finished the night tour in Mario Kart Tour because that was near the peak of my obsession with that game, but surely that couldn't have taken me any more than like an hour or 2. I might have just sat and kept up with the trip group chat as I let my family know what was going on. 3:30 did eventually come around though, and by the time my plane was scheduled to depart, we still had not even started boarding. That wasn't until another hour later. I remember texting my dad about it while it was happening and being hit with the "chill out crying laughing emoji" response, which was exactly what I needed to hear at that point. Very calming. I could tell the rest of the line was just as fed up with waiting because once we were on board, there was an announcement to the effect of, "Sorry guys, we're missing a food cart for service. Now we could wait another hour, or we could dude, which damn near the entire plane cut him off by shouting no in unison. That shit felt scripted straight out of a comedy movie, and it's the closest I've ever felt to a group of people that I didn't know. After all that, there were no more delays for takeoff. I had 8 hours before I touched down, so I spent a few of them watching Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, the ending of Guardians of the Galaxy 2, a couple of the Community episodes they had on offer, which I don't recall what selection of 10 they had, but I remember them being really good ones, then spent the rest of my time trying to sleep. Since I hadn't flown such a long distance in well over a decade, I was unaware that the food they offered was complimentary, so I turned mine down like a fucking idiot. I did get a spoon to finally eat my cheesecake pot though, and by now it had warmed up to room temperature. Delicious. After all that was said and done, I finally landed, only 2 hours after my originally planned arrival time. In Chicago. Remember when I said I got rerouted? Yeah, that wasn't a direct flight to Miami. It was firstly to Chicago, then to Houston, where I would have to spend the night, which is why they gave me that form to claim reimbursement for the hotel costs. Foreshadowing is a literary device, and I would arrive in Miami the next morning at 11 AM. It was all extremely stressful, but rest assured I was processing it very well, handling everything with dignity and grace. All seemed like it was going according to plan B, right? Nope. Remember that this plane took off a full hour after it was supposed to. I'm pretty sure the journey was longer than originally planned as well. I only had about an hour between my arrival and departure in Chicago, so it would have been a tight time frame even if we were on schedule. Now with the additional delays, I'd missed it. Luckily the new route they put me on for Plan C was a straight shot from Chicago to Miami. I didn't need to deal with any more bullshit relating to connections. I did still need to stay the night though, because there were 14 hours until my last flight. So I got a taxi to the airport hotel, which cost me $50 for the less than 15 minutes it took to drive there. It might have been as little as 3 minutes, I don't remember for sure. I'm certain that I got scammed as the tourist from another country, but at this point I didn't have the energy to fight it, and I booked myself a room for the evening so that I could get some sleep without needing to be in the middle of the floor on my own. So now it's 3 in the morning on Monday, where I was supposed to have already landed and spent an evening with my friends, but whatever, can't dwell on that too much. I get ready to head back out feeling like absolute shit, because even though my room did have a shower and things to wash myself with, I wasn't given my suitcase back with my spare clothes and toiletries. So I was wearing the same outfit as the day before and had to use a pack of mints as a substitute for being able to brush my teeth. The day was off to an excellent start. I only say that mostly sarcastically because after I got through security, I did get to the one bright spot of this hellish journey. I needed to grab some breakfast before my flight, and my search through the airport led me to the Tuscany Cafe. Shout out to them because it was a really damn good breakfast and the first time that I felt joy since that initial delay. Then 11 AM rolls around, my flight takes off, and I land in Miami at 3 PM. 21 entire hours after I was supposed to be there initially. The rest of the process after that was pretty quick. I let everyone else know that I was there, they send a group to pick me up, I get my suitcase without any bother, foreshadowing, and I go to wait for the car to arrive at the pickup zone. You'd think that'd be the end of the travel there, but the dynamic trio that was sent to get me still managed to cram in a few final quirkies by the time we got to the Airbnb. The group that came to pick me up included hit death battle YouTuber Galactic Attorney, Donovan from the Nemesis Bloodrike Death Battle reactions, and famed Discord mod DJ Tiki. Out of the three of them, only Don knew what I looked like. So there was a point where DJ was standing like 10 feet away from me on the opposite end of a door asking where I was when I was the only other person around. I hadn't seen his face that often or recently either, so I had no clue that it was him. These messages were sent when we were unknowingly stood about right next to each other. Eventually we did figure everything out, I got in the car and we headed back. And I'd mentally prepared myself to go around and say hi to everyone individually. I mean, not counting the people in the car, most of the 17 other people there didn't know my face. And I've got social anxiety, so I was just gonna take introductions slowly. Then as I was walking through the front door, GA introduced me like the celebrity guest on a game show to which every single person in the room turned and looked at the same time. I can't even be mad at that because it was indeed very funny. After this point was where I could finally get cleaned up, changed, and meet with everybody. If you've seen the group reaction to the Stitch vs Rocket death battle that I've posted before, this happened very shortly after where that story left off. Following that was a very eventful week. We went mini-golfing, visited the marketplace and the mall, did a few rounds of bowling, played a bunch of games in the house, held a potluck and a few movie nights, did an escape room. I even had the first 2 pleasant trips to the beach of my entire life, because it turns out it can be fun when I'm with a group that only wants to be there for 90 minutes rather than 6+ hours where I wish I could be anywhere else. office. This video isn't meant to be about what we got up to on the trips during the week. It is mainly the funny travel setbacks that I want to focus on, but the one experience that I do want to mention in particular was on the final day, where my friend Ollie from the Squid Games needed to deliver a parcel back home, so she asked Donovan to take her to the post office. I asked if I could tag along, as did our other friend Larry, inventor of Among Us vs Fall Guys. The four of us went looking for this post office for about an hour following the directions we were given, and eventually just admitted defeat. We had been bested by Schrodinger's post office. We didn't want to go all that way for nothing though, so we stopped at Burger King and had a quick bite to eat. For as much as I was loving the busy week with the whole group, taking one afternoon to slow down and just go for a walk and some food with 3 of my closest friends ended up being probably my most cherished memory that I made on that trip. Hell, one of my most treasured memories in general that I look back on as a pick-me-up whenever I'm feeling down. I mean, that's what I do back in Scotland anyway, so it made me feel like I was right at home, just with people I don't get to see very often. Speaking of back home, that's where we all had to go the next day as our week was at its end. Those that were driving headed back in the morning, the rest of us spent our final day at the airport, waiting for our time to pass through security as we dwindled one by one. We had to hang out before security as we were all split between different terminals. But I was able to check my suitcase in early, so I didn't have to lug that around. We ate lunch by a small fast food area. I now finally see why all you Americans call KFC mid, and eventually we were down to the final 4. Ollie and I were supposed to be the next 2 to depart, and we were at the same terminal, so we were going to head through security together. We were on different flights though. She was heading to London, and I was on the reverse of my original schedule where I'd go to New York, then back to Edinburgh. And as we're walking to the terminal, I take a glance at the departure screen, and oh my fucking god, it's cancelled again. I speak with the help desk. Turns out it's because of New York weather again, and the only option for me to get home is to go from Miami to Houston to Chicago and then to Edinburgh. So the reverse of plan B when I originally got delayed on my way out. And of course it meant I'd have to stay in Miami airport overnight. The stress of that, plus getting it sprung on me that I would have to say goodbye immediately to the friend that I thought I still had an hour with, yeah, it might have broken me a little bit. I tried to pull myself together. I go for a Subway dinner with the 2 friends I still had with me. I hear one of them explaining to the Subway employee that our other friend watching our bags just wants an untoasted ham and cheese sandwich, which understandably made them very confused. Then after a point I get mentally exhausted, so I book the room that I'm gonna be in for all of 7 hours and then go to bed. The rest of the journey home was pretty uneventful. It all went about as planned. On the planes I rewatched Encanto and the Suicide Squad, the latter of which had all the swearing awkwardly dubbed over. And holy crap, I didn't realize it was so easy to turn this movie into the least cool thing that's ever been put to screens. It is indeed so much more biting for Bloodsport and his daughter to be shouting "forget you" at each other. It's much funnier when Peacemaker says he would eat a whole beach worth of bricks to preserve peace. Apparently the word butthole was too much for them to put in this gore fest of a movie, which they touched none of by the way. Can't say a naughty word, but you can see King Shark rip a man in half. That's fine. Who the heck decided on that? I also rewatched the Guardians 2 ending again because I guess I wasn't sad enough about leaving at that point. Then I make it home, no issues. Now comes time to make use of that reimbursement form I was given the previous Sunday. I mean, I had to spend over $500 out of pocket on food and accommodations due to the airline's delays, while being held back an additional 21 hours each way. I was expecting them to cover that, especially after they told me that they would. And to keep a long story short, to not drag this part of the video out further, I was constantly emailing back and forth with the airline, and after 3 months of pushing back against them with my insurance company refusing to help in the slightest, they finally agreed to reimburse me $200. Less than half of what I had to spend because of them. Now, I'm not gonna name any names, but it was United and I'm avoiding them like the plague if I have the chance in the future. Even still, this didn't sour my feelings on the trips at all. It was still one of the best weeks of my life. If anything, the worst part was that everyone decided next year's trip would be in the winter, so there'd be an extra 6 months to wait compared to the 1 year apart these normally are. Which leads us into the next story. Don't worry, this won't go on for nearly as long as the Miami section. Compared to the odyssey that one sent me on, my second journey was more straightforward. Relatively speaking anyway. So, December 29th, 2024. I'm on my way to my next meetup in Davenport, Florida, which requires me to fly to the Orlando airport with one stop stop along the way in Amsterdam. Same wake up times as before, this time my initial departure is at 9:15, which check-in isn't even open for when I arrive at 6:30. After I get through security though, once again speedrunning through the perfume store, I'm hit with a horrifying email headline saying that my first flight is delayed by like 15 minutes, so we're fine actually. It takes off at 9:30, all is good. I arrive without any issue. I mean, there was a bit of panic anytime I thought I heard all sound cutting out, and I couldn't tell if it was because the plane was course correcting or if I was fucking dying. But last I checked, I'm still alive, so in hindsight, I'm gonna assume it was the former. My co-workers kept talking up Amsterdam airport like the goddamn boogeyman with how big it supposedly is. But I think the walk from my plane to the next gate I needed to get to took me maybe 5 minutes. The second flight to Orlando was then delayed by about an hour, and frankly, thank God. Like, yeah, I didn't take long to get there, but I was originally only gonna have 25 minutes between landing and taking off again, so I was glad to have that safety net. At about 2 p.m. local time, my flight takes off and the next over 10 hours of my life begin. At first, it was all going fine. I took up their offers for meals this time, and I got to rewatch Inside Out.
What is going on? We're abstracting.
Oh my god, why did I laugh at that? I even managed to finish editing my Pikmin 1 boss ranking, since much to the dismay of my friends, I do this all on my phone. After that, the journey started to get a little rougher. I was starting to feel just a bit tired, but I didn't want to have a full night's sleep yet, so I put on Into the Spider-Verse to try and stay awake. But even that wasn't working, which should tell you that something was very wrong. My memory's a little hazier for most of the flight. I think at some point I did get some rest, but I woke back up after a while because I was feeling too ill. Travel sickness got real bad in those final couple hours. It was some of the worst nausea I've ever experienced. I tried rewatching Marcel the Shell with Shoes On to take my mind off things, and it was a very weird mix of feelings to be trying to watch a movie that I love like that, while I was full body shivering from air sickness like I've never felt before. The last meal I was offered was a pizza twist, but at this point I could barely stand the smell of any food, so I had to put it in my bag for later and try not to notice it so that I didn't throw up. You know what the single worst part of the flight was though? Not the nausea and not the 10 hours straight spent sitting in the same seat. The real highlight was in the last 15 minutes where we hit some rough turbulence. The intercom comes on to say, "You are experiencing an emergency," and then just stops. That gave me a shot of adrenaline, which I'm pretty sure was the main reason I didn't spew at any point, because I was too focused on the fear that after nearly 18 months of waiting and an over 15-hour journey that I was gonna fucking die barely 10 minutes from touching the ground. The turbulence never even ended up amounting to anything, so I questioned what the point of the intercom was. I couldn't wait to get up and moving again when the plane landed, but it took like half an hour for us to get hooked up to a terminal so that we could leave. By that point, the sickness had vanished and I could feel my legs again, so I didn't need to worry about navigating my way around a massive airport while on the verge of falling over. I did get lost several times when looking for my friends, ended up being very intimidated when the only nearby staff I could approach for directions were the security guards holding full-size assault rifles, but I eventually found the last few stragglers that arrived at the same time as me for the final car ride. It was me, Larry, and famous Twitch nuzlocke Jukum FGC who ventured off together to Donovan's car. We stacked all our luggage in like a game of Tetris, then made it back to the resort we were staying at, early enough to still have an evening left to spend with a group if you can believe it. There was leftover pizza that had been ordered earlier, but I wanted to finish the one that I got on the flight first. I don't think I've ever had something so quickly go from "this is okay" after the initial 2 bites to "I wish I was eating anything else" for the rest of it. It tasted terrible, but I was too committed to throw it away. After that, we had a more uneventful, but still really enjoyable week around the resort. We went for some nice meals, did more games and movies, including a trip to Disney Springs to see Sonic 3, held a karaoke night. I had a great time. I just dreaded traveling back because I knew something would probably go wrong again. And wouldn't you know it, something did. This was another case where me and the rest of the flyers who hadn't already left spent our day in the food court, taking everybody to their gates when they needed to go. I got a slice of pizza and a cinnamon roll to keep me going. I loved the pizza, but for as much of a sweet tooth as I normally have, I had to admit defeat to Cinnabon. It was a combination of it being massive, heavy, really sweet, hot out the oven, and having a really strong smell that it overwhelmed every sense I have. So I gave in with a third of it left to go. I hate wasting food whenever I can avoid it, but I'd already taken so long getting this far and we did need to get up and move. Plus, if I did take another bite, the whole thing would have come back up. I'll have my rematch someday. My journey had 3 scheduled flights. Orlando to New York, then to Amsterdam, then finally home to Edinburgh. My first flight got delayed earlier, but whatever. I still had plenty of time to catch my next connection. All this meant is that I'd get to spend more time with my friends rather than waiting on my lonesome. Then we check again later, and there's been another delay. Okay, this is gonna be a problem. I have to reroute myself on the Delta Airlines app because I am not making that New York to Amsterdam flight. But all the options they're giving me are for the next day, meaning I'd have to stay overnight again. You can imagine how excited I was for that. As a last-ditch effort, I went to the Delta help desk to see if there was anything we could do. And shockingly enough, they were able to redirect me to a different airline and have me fly overnight back to London Heathrow. From there, I would fly straight back to Edinburgh, arriving at about the same time I was supposed to originally. So, against all odds, I wasn't delayed this time. I think I'm cursed to never see New York though. It also meant that I was the last one in the airport again, and had to let that post-trip sadness set in as I waited. But that's a price I'm much more willing to pay than another $200 on a hotel room that I'm barely gonna be in. If there's anything that I learned from this and the next trip, it's that airport staff are miracle workers. They have saved my ass multiple times, and I cannot fathom having the patience necessary to work their jobs. I remember nothing that happened on the flights back. I see that I didn't log anything in my letterbox diary for that day, so I can only assume I spent the whole flight trying to sleep. No idea if I succeeded. That entire overnight period of my life is a blur. I got back at a decent time too. It was still morning on Monday, so I actually got to have the rest of that day. Only downside being that the change in airline meant there was an issue with getting my suitcase back, since Delta still had it in Florida. That was an easy enough fix though. I logged a call with the claims desk, gave them my address, and they delivered it to my door the next day. Again, more than worth it as a trade-off for getting home when I was supposed to. I hope this is the last bit of bother I have with the suitcase getting delivered. Foreshadowing. Another great week for the books. I had a lovely time spending New Year with everybody, and travel was relatively painless this time. Well, painless in the sense of everything sticking to schedule. I was in a lot of actual pain on that flight over, but that doesn't matter. So with this all going so much better than last time, surely that meant the travel for the next trip would keep that trend going and be totally smooth sailing. In some ways, yes actually. In others, it was a complete disaster. Either way, it was a whole lot more stressful. This one's a bit different from the last two because I wasn't traveling alone. I'd asked Ollie if she wanted to meet up so that we could fly together. The plan would be that I'd travel from Edinburgh to London, and then we go to America together on the same plane. This time being to Philadelphia between August 10th and 17th, 2025. It didn't look like there were any flight times that would line up for that, so we threw in the towel. But right as I was about to book a different route, my local travel agent checked one last time and we actually found something. So we were able to go together after all. We did book separately, so we weren't guaranteed seats next to each other, but surely it would be fine. Everything was looking good for us. Then the day of travel actually arrives. I went to bed at around 9:30 to 10 PM the night before, and woke up at around about 4:45 since my flight was at 7:30. And yes, you're absolutely right, that wasn't enough sleep. I check my Discord to see if everyone else's travel is going okay while I eat breakfast, and I see that I've got a series of DMs from Ollie less than an hour ago letting me know about changes to our schedule. Turns out the London to Philly flight had been delayed, going from the back of 12 to the back of 1 in the afternoon. Okay, well, it's a straight shot from London to Philly and we don't need to catch any connecting flights, so this isn't too bad. The following day. Obviously, this sends me straight into a state of panic, so I get on the online check-in for British Airways and everything is normal for me. I decided that this wasn't the time or place for me to worry. I'd continue as normal and we'd figure things out when we met in London. We had booked the exact same plane, so either we were both boarding it or we were both staying overnight in London. I get my boarding passes from Edinburgh, feel great about passing through the perfume store without stopping again, and fly out at my normal time. Then once I get off the plane, I see there's a help desk with American Airlines who are managing the flights. I'm naming and shaming already, that's how you know things went well. I speak with the worker there and find out that our original 12:30 flight was cancelled and both of us had been rerouted. Except because we did our booking separately, it meant they didn't know to keep us together, and so they put me on a plane scheduled to depart right after 1 PM, and Ollie had been filtered onto the next day one. This is something we need to be together in person to get sorted. So we spend an embarrassingly long amount of time looking for each other in Terminal 3 and giving each other directions, before we realise that we're on different sides of security because she was over 24 hours from her flight and couldn't get her boarding pass yet. In order to meet, I would need to go back to before security, which the employees at the airport were able to help me with, despite strongly advising otherwise since I only had 3 hours before my next flight was set to depart. It was just after 10 AM by this point, so I told myself that I'd do what I could before 11:30, and then if it came to it, we would need to get Ollie a hotel room and I'd fly out by myself. Maybe I would have checked to see if I could be put on the next day's plane as well, but we never got to that stage, so who knows. Once the two of us had met at the check-in lanes, we approached the workers at the desk. Somehow, despite running on less than 6 hours of sleep and an overwhelming feeling of stress, I managed to lock the fuck in and explain the situation clearly and comprehensively to the employees so that they knew what was going on and how to fix it. For once in my life, I was entirely organized, well-spoken, and completely on top of things. No clue where that guy came from, but God, I want to be him again. I miss that feeling that I got to have for those few minutes. They told us there was nothing they could do at first, but after some more talk, they were able to get Ollie on the standby list for my plane in case there were any free spaces. We weren't entirely out of the woods yet, but knew there was at least a chance that things would work out in our favor. We spent a bit of time at the airport after getting through security, got some lunch from a sandwich place, then came time to get on the plane. We both got through no bother, though we weren't sat next to each other, so I was worried about the possibility that she'd get booted off if the aircraft was full, and that I wouldn't notice with my phone on airplane mode. After takeoff, I looked back and saw her sat 3 rows behind me, so now we were in the clear and could finally relax. Both off to Philly at the same time and would be arriving on schedule. I'd said that we would ask the people around us if we could move and sit next to each other, but it was a busy flight that we were on opposite ends of with attendants walking around everywhere, and I didn't want to cause a commotion, so we just sat separately and let things play out. I would just need to check with the airline in advance if we can arrange to be sat next together on the way back in a week. For now, I just sat and spent an embarrassingly long time playing one of those in-flight arcade games where you drop a bunch of donuts onto matching ones. Then I had a look through their selection of movies. I tend to only re-watch things on flights, since I don't want my first exposure to a film to be in 480p fighting over the sound of a jet engine, and I had plenty of great options to pick from. They had Paddington 2, Finding Nemo, and Godzilla Minus One. For as great as it would have been to marathon my second, third, and fourth favourite films as a triple feature, I could tell that I wasn't going to be able to stay awake long enough for that. So I only watched Nemo, then checked out a few episodes of Bob's Burgers, which broke the rule I just mentioned 10 seconds ago, but I didn't really care, and spent the rest of the time trying to sleep. Around 3 PM local time, our plane lands in Philly and everything's gone smoothly, especially for how stressful the morning was. Something I made the mistake of thinking to myself, not realizing what I just willed into reality. So the two of us get through security, and it's off to the baggage carousel to collect my suitcase at about 3:30. So then 4:30 rolls around. Where the fuck is my suitcase? Right, so I need to go to baggage claims and raise it with them. After we speak for a few minutes, they find out that it was checked in at London but never sent to Philly. I'm assuming this was because of the flight change, but they never confirmed anything. It would be the same situation as last time though. They said they'd deliver it to the address of the place I was staying, so I just had to wait for it there. Ollie and I meet with the last few people at the airport, Galactic Attorney picks us up and drives us back on 30 minutes of sleep, the absolute legend, and at this point all I need to do is keep my eye on my email for any updates. Round about 8 or 9 PM, I get told by the baggage delivery company that it'll be here vaguely at some point before 3:30 in the morning. Not sure why they'd be delivering that late when they said they don't do after 11 at night, but I had to reschedule regardless because I was only able to stay up until 1. Now it was set to arrive between 8 AM and 12 PM on the Monday. So 12 PM on Monday has come around and nothing has happened. No suitcase, no updates. I start sending emails to both American Airlines and the Where's My Suitcase company that was supposed to have carried out the delivery by now. Nothing. I get on the American Airline customer support helpline, and they tell me it's with the baggage company, so they can't do anything right now. Lovely. I tried rescheduling it to between 6 and 10 PM that night, making sure I keep an eye out for anything that comes through. Our group watched Epic the Musical that evening, and Ollie told me that she saw me check my emails like 50 times in Act 1 alone, which should tell you about where I was at mentally for that entire day. By 10 PM, I've been left completely in the dark, and I'm freaking out a bit. So I send one last email to the airline, this time saying that if I have to buy new stuff to replace what they'd lost, then I would be expecting them to reimburse me. Funny enough, it's the wildest coincidence. They got back to me almost immediately. I wonder why that was. We get everything cleared up, and they tell me that the delivery would be tomorrow for sure. I asked if they could narrow it down to in the morning or the afternoon. If it wouldn't be before 12, then I would just go to the airport and pick it up myself since they said that's where they had it. I just wanted to change my clothes and brush my teeth. I felt like a rotting corpse. They didn't get back to me anymore after that point, so I figured that if I hadn't heard anything by 12 on Tuesday, then I'd ask GA to drive me over and we'd pick it up. Surely enough, we get to 12 and nothing has happened. So GA, Larry, Ollie and I head over to Philly Airport and go to the baggage claim where they said they had it. And it wasn't there. It had been picked up in the morning and sent out for delivery, so we had made our way there for nothing. At least we got the phone number of the driver taking it to us, and come 2 PM, it finally arrives at our front door. I probably could have attempted to get some form of compensation from American Airlines or Where's My Suitcase. I mean, they essentially had me lose 2 days of this trip, which I spent on the verge of a realistic depiction of a panic attack, but I knew how long that process would take, and I didn't want to spend any more time or mental capacity on this bullshit. I just wanted to enjoy the rest of my week. And I did. We went to the zoo, spent one of the best days of my life at the mall with an arcade and cinema where we saw the new Naked Gun, went for my first ever Philly cheesesteak, which was incredible, did another karaoke night, watched some more movies. It was a blast. On the final night, our friend Sam from the Sir Musty live chat hosted a Death Battle themed Jeopardy game. I went on a team with Larry and Ollie and we fucking won. We were 900 points behind first place when the board was cleared. But for the final question, what was the first episode to mention Wiz's robot arm, we bet all 2,000 of our points on Folgore vs Sector, and it shot us into the lead by 100 points. Greatest victory of my life and new favourite episode of the series. I couldn't let that victory go to my head though. I had to be ready to travel back on Sunday. This time I wanted to make sure that Ollie and I could sit together on the plane. I tried speaking to customer support about it when I was dealing with a suitcase situation, but they said I needed to arrange that on the day at the check-in desk. So after saying goodbye to everyone else who went through their gates before our check-in opened, and spending the next hour or so talking while we waited, we get to the front of the line, ask if they can see us next to each other, and prepare to read out all the information I'd written down that they might need, only for them to scan our passports and get us that pair of seats without any hassle. And for as entertaining as it would be to say that something went horribly wrong after this point, it really didn't. We got through security no problem, met with DJ for a while on the other side before we went to our gate. I even kept checking the departure schedule screens out of paranoia, but nothing was changing. Our flight boarded and took off on schedule, and we had no issues with our seats. Everything went about as smoothly as it possibly could have. What followed that was probably the best plane ride I've ever had, since Ollie and I just got to sit and watch a bunch of films together. We watched Dogman, which was really cute and funny, Paddington in Peru, which emotionally destroyed us both, and Flow, which was completely wordless, so it made sense for us to watch when we got too tired to process any dialogue. At some point, the person next to us also got pulled away for either a medical or family emergency, I don't remember which, and we never saw them again. This left Ollie with 2 seats next to each other to use as a bed, and for someone shorter than 5'9", that's basically an entire sprawling kingdom in terms of room. We did try and sleep at some point, but collectively we maybe got 90 minutes, so that didn't go too well. We got some nice food though. A pretty good chicken and potato dish with a key lime pie. It was no Tuscany cafe, but it was a solid breakfast. Once we landed and parted ways in London, I hauled my depressed ass onto the second and final plane, which also departed and arrived on time, got my suitcase as one of the first to appear at the baggage carousel, went home and took the fattest 5-hour nap of my life. I was fully prepared for things to go south at every stage of this process, but everything went shockingly perfectly. And after every journey before that being full of stress and anguish, I'm really happy to have one that finally went off without a hitch so that I could just enjoy the time I had with my friend. The setbacks I faced on my travels caused me a hell of a lot of stress while they were happening, but they've at least made for funny stories to look back on. And frankly, I'd go through it all again a dozen times over for another week with my friends, because these trips have been some of the best experiences of my life. If you can believe it, I have not been the one to have the worst travel luck every time. Some of the others in my group have been rerouted and delayed for multiple days. But those tales aren't mine to tell, so that'll be the end of this story time. It's very out of my comfort zone for the types of videos I'd normally make, so I hope I was able to make it at least somewhat entertaining. Thank you for watching, I hope you got something out of this. And if anyone from United or American Airlines happens to be watching, hi, I'll take that extra $300 by direct bank transfer, please and thank you.